Hi guys, I'm Deep, also known as the Rusty Cashew, and this here is the NE118. This is something a friend of mine picked up a couple of months ago. We bought it blind, just over the phone, and we thought, okay, this is a great donor. It was running, it is running. We thought, okay, we'll take this engine and put it into the Lada, which is covered over there. We've got something else in there, but that's for the next episode or in a while. So what we did was we thought, okay, this is a great donor, and we didn't expect much from it. But when we got it, we realized it's a car. It's fine, it's not that bad. It's bad paint. It's got a bit of rust, but it is a car, and very few of these NEs still survive. So the first time I took it around, I noticed one thing. I can kind of show you guys what happened. So when we got this car, we had a little problem. I took it out for its first drive, and what I noticed was that the radiator fan sprung a leak. The radiator sprung a leak. Basically, this is almost a brand new radiator, and the fan would have sat over here. But what happened was, because of how weak the engine mounts were, the radiator fan hit the radiator right over here, and it burst a leak. So to prevent that from further happening, what we did was we added an electric fan over here. We thought we'd do it over here because there was a bit of a problem sourcing one of these. Today it's getting really difficult to get these aftermarket accessories because now you have modern cars, this type of shit doesn't work anymore. You have to put in new stuff that is OEM, but this is the type of stuff that used to happen back in the day. People used to put AC condensers over here, and there would be a fan in front. And I think on Ambassadors sometimes you could see those fans through the grille. But that's not something we have to do today. Everything comes with an AC, everything has power steering. So that doesn't happen. But this is the type of thing that is no longer available. We have to work with what we have. And that's what we did. We changed the mounts. We also changed the clutch. So now the clutch on this car is fresh. But this is supposedly a common issue with this car. What we've noticed is, I spoke to a couple of other guys, even the person I've sourced parts from. And he's noticed that, he says that if you tighten the belt too much, this happens. But I think this is just a problem with this car itself. It's a design flaw. Maybe when the rubbers wear out, this is happening. I put up a question on Instagram about what did you guys want to know about this car. One of the points was, how's rust, how's maintenance, can I daily drive this car? And what I did for the last week was I've been daily driving this. I had no problems. I changed the spark plugs, that was something that was going wrong. It's fine now, it works well. As long as the carburetor is clean, this car is lovely to drive. The suspension is great. This one is short, but I'm taking all these opinions that I'm giving you based on this car alone. I've never driven another NE. It's about this car, and we can generally accept that most cars would be somewhere around this condition because this is what they've reached to. Some things are just not available. Like, we wanted the shock absorbers for this car. We wanted the shocks. We can't get them very easily. They're quite expensive too for what the car is. One of the major issues here that is just the problem with this car and all its other counterparts like the Lada, like the Fiat as well, is rust. You can see a massive hole over here. We've got rust. So that's one hole. One second, Mishka. No, that doesn't mean you're supposed to go in. We've got rust over here on the floor, on the running board and stuff like that. We've got rust in plenty of places. And that is one of the major problems with this car. Apart from that, I think it's fantastic. It's light. I think it's somewhere around 900 kgs. And it's not too heavy. It's a nice, well-packed car. Small, easy to use. I think you could daily this if you wanted to try. Another thing people asked me about was, what about the body kits and stuff? And currently, we're trying to get spacers for the wheels. That's something that's a bit of a challenge because this is 98 PCD. We've got some odd PCD set of wheels, but 98 PCD is a challenge because this is specific to Fiats and many Italian cars. The next thing is, once we have the spacers, we'll have the wheels at the right offset. They'll be somewhere over here, hopefully. Then we'll put a wheel arch over here. We'll make something custom if we have to. If the wheels line up, we'll probably not do that. Another thing we'd like to add is a little ducktail spoiler, something that's plastic or fiberglass. Also a chin in the front. Maybe, maybe not remove these bumpers. They look funky to me. They don't look right. So today we're with Veer, who sadly owns this car.
Sadly. Get out of my car.
Oh, let's see if it
whoa,
drifts.
wheel spin drifting already, yeah? Whoa,
maybe
easy,
this
easy.
one.
Okay, let's just get it up the slope. We'll take it easy.
Oh yeah, yeah. it'll survive this one.
Alright.
So yeah, we want to talk about the car and what we've experienced with it. Smooth engine.
Well, unbelievably smooth. I think when the car is running, you can actually hear the new electric fan running more than the engine itself.
Yeah, I think sometimes I can hardly hear it on, right?
Yeah, it's beautiful that way. I mean, hats off to, I guess, whoever's maintained the car previously. It survived, it's 32 years old now. It's a 1990 model, right?
So this is an early one, right? 1990 this is.
I think the production started probably 86, 87. But I remember when I used to go to school in the late 80s, since I'm so young, one of my friends in the carpool used to have an NE. So
Okay.
I think it's been around since the mid to late 80s, yeah.
Okay. Now the interest in this car is all about its Lada relation, right? The Fiat came out in 1966. Then 2 years later, the Russians took it.
No, I think the Russians took in the late 70s, right?
No, actually in the 60s. So that's
Okay.
when it was very close to it. In the late 60s, they started with testing and stuff like that. Finally,
Okay.
they took it, and they did make some changes. They made it better for their conditions. Their road conditions are harsh. I think they might have changed the suspension a bit. They made it stronger, more stiffer, right? That's one thing they did. And apart from that, they also they made a little changes here, like I think with the handles and all. That's aesthetic.
Yeah.
But the main difference was the metal. The steel was heavier, but they were given Italian metal, and that's where those cars started rusting. Because that might have been more recycled metal or something like that. It was inferior quality.
Right.
Yeah, and that's why those cars started rusting. But they say that the early Ladas were good, quite good. Yeah.
So maybe over time, as you said, the Russian conditions are brutal.
Yeah.
But I think that the USP of Ladas all over the world till today are that they just keep on running no matter what
Yeah.
condition they're in. And even this one, even though she clearly, needs a lot of TLC and work
Yeah.
and rust repair, etc., she's still running. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
she's
beautiful. Like the other day, we went for a long drive, no problem.
Yeah. I've been dealing this for a week, and I find it's quite good. I had no problems with it. So we were talking about the evolution as well. I think what happened was you were saying in the late 70s, right?
I read up on Wikipedia, so I'm not particularly clued up on the actuals. But yeah, I presume Fiat sold the mold to the Vaz company, which I guess branded it abroad as Lada. I think in Russia probably known as various variants of the Vaz, something or the other. And yeah, I think it was in production till quite recently.
But there are some design differences between that Lada and this one. That is definitely a facelift, right? The body line is very similar to
Very
the
similar,
124. I think the grill and stuff changed, right?
Well, I'm sure there'll be subtle aesthetic differences, but that's purely, I think, for the ease of manufacturing and what probably your local vendors were able to manufacture in various countries, right?
That's also what new car guys do, right? They badge engineer, right? They change the front and
So
the
like
back.
even the bumpers on this car are like proper plastic,
Yeah.
right? So I don't know how much they'll stop anything.
Yeah.
But the ones on the Lada are like metal. And they look similar-ish, they're not identical, but overall they've got that boxy kind of the boxy shape.
Yeah.
And but the materials are completely different.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean obviously less sturdy. And
This is like 10 years after the Fiat was built, and maybe that's when they ended production in Italy.
so it'd
or
be interesting to know whether the Premier company which produced this 118 NE in India, whether they bought the mold from Fiat, or I guess must have, because their relationship was with Fiat, because they started manufacturing the 1100 in India, right?
Yeah.
So they must have bought it directly from Fiat when they probably stopped production somewhere else in the world and brought it to India in the mid-80s. And I think this was probably the same time or slightly after the Contessa was launched.
Oh, okay.
I think the Contessa definitely came first, and when the Contessa originally was sold in India, it was sold with the same 1500cc BMC engine as the Ambassador.
I've never seen one of those.
So I think they must have all disappeared. I think they were made for a short time, and then the second run of the Contessas were made with the 1800 Isuzu.
Oh,
So it's like a hot rod in itself. It was actually Contessas were originally a Vauxhall, right?
Yeah.
Vauxhall Victor, if I'm not mistaken.
Something like that. A Vauxhall Victor.
I think Victor, and I think in Australia they were sold as a Holden something, but they're all the same GM kind of
Yeah,
mother
yeah.
brand, right?
Yeah.
But coming back to this, I presume Premier thought this would be a improvement on the Padmini and compete with the Contessa.
This was placed above market price, right? More expensive?
I presume so. It was newer tech.
Yeah.
I think the interiors are more plush and modern. You got a floor shift gearbox. I think the floor shift from the Fiat came a bit later.
I think a lot of ministers got these cars, right? That was the thing back then.
Well, like in Delhi, it was all ambassadors, yeah. But I think like the Contessa was more luxurious than this because it is a bigger car. Eventually had an 1800cc engine. I think they also made a 2-liter diesel Contessa later. But yeah, I think this tried to compete and probably maybe even take on the Maruti 800 because this is definitely launched before the 1000 was launched and before the Esteem came into being. So maybe to take on the Gypsy, which is probably launched around the same time, probably compete with the 800 because of its reputation as a sturdy, you know, car that would never break down and keep on going. But I don't think this gave the same mileage as a 800.
Wonder what the mileage is.
Or a Omni or whatever. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty. I'm sure it's pretty good. It's only a 1200cc engine, right?
It's 1200. It's probably 900 kgs. It's not bad.
Yeah, it's good power to weight ratio.
An Ambassador would be much heavier.
Much heavier. So obviously better mileage than an Ambi, but not the space.
Yeah.
People, or perhaps the social status of a Ambi being more of a.
Yeah, that's more. I mean, you can move around, right? You have some space for your legs.
But in the front seat is quite comfortable. But if somebody had to sit behind us, I don't think they would be comfortable.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this car, quite a few were sold. At least when I grew up in Delhi and Calcutta, I would see quite a few around. But they disappeared quite fast. I don't know how long the production run was really. But being produced in, I presume it was produced, I mean, near Bombay and Pune and all that. That probably that side of India had more of these.
That might be also why. Is that why Kolkata has more ambassadors?
Exactly. Hindustan Motors plant was outside Calcutta.
Okay.
So you see the cabs in Calcutta were all, and I think still are, ambassadors. And in Bombay were Fiats. So you know, parts are easily available.
Yeah.
They probably subsidize the cabbies to help them out.
Yeah.
But I don't think many NEs were made cabs. Probably they were too premium to.
I've seen one actually. I've seen one in Goa once.
Okay.
I came across a taxi and I was shocked to see it.
Yeah.
It was really weird. So yeah. So that I think also some people also pointed out that this one has quarter windows. That isn't something that all cars have. I think it's maybe
Probably an older model.
Very early.
I think a quarter window is just a sign of it being a little old school.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah, people get to say, oh yeah, I've got an air conditioning, and then they open up there.
Really effective, truly. But yeah, I mean, but also it's interesting that how the Premier Group clearly had the Fiat 1100D engine with them. So which could be probably, I know when they used to race the cars in India, they used to bore them out to close to 1200. You know, 1198 was the CC cap in the A2, which is a highly modified category. So they could have done something similar and used that same Fiat engine. But I think they chose to go with this Nissan engine, which is really interesting. Like how even Hindustan Motors went with Isuzu. I guess PAL went with Nissan. All going the Japanese way to get more economy. I think that was the key. You know,
The Japs make good engines actually. There's no
I
doubt
think
there.
for India it was purely, you know, that there's that famous ad where, saying now that kitni average deti hai. You know, that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
Like how much of an average is this car giving you? And
I think that's still one of the most common questions you get asked when somebody sees a car like this, an old car. They'll always ask you. It's kind of the mindset, right?
I mean, watch out.
So the suspension does work.
It does work, but I'm more scared of the Goa roads now after the monsoon, man. It's quite big now.
Yeah. So yeah, a lot of people asked about engine swaps because everyone thinks it's a rear-wheel drive. I think it's cheap. These cars.
It is a rear-wheel drive.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean it's a fast rear-wheel drive. I mean, if you were to go with that logic, the Ambassador should be the first car that people should hot rod, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's a rear-wheel drive, been rear-wheel drive and manufactured in India since the late 50s. But no one's really. I've heard rumors. Some people have claimed to put in a V8 and an Ambi. That's something I really want to do one day. But
I've seen two JZs, right? I think two of them are running that out of Bombay.
So I think one guy did a 2JZ, the other guy put in something from a Sylvia.
Oh yeah, it's the same guy. This KS, he's done those. So he's done I think a 2JZ and this.
Yeah.
But we're trying.
I know the Silvia for sure, because I think I know the guy who bought the scrapped Silvia and tried to put it back together in Coimbatore.
But it's a expensive thing to buy an engine worth, like today a 2JZ is expensive.
I think back about 10 years ago in India, things were a bit cheaper. You had quite a few 2JZ kind of donor cars.
GS, how much was that back then? Maybe 5 years, 10 years ago?
I had picked up a GS how many years ago? 2015 maybe, 14, 15. I got it for maybe 3 lakhs or something.
Rana.
Yeah, I used it as a daily for quite
And that was a GTE, right?
I don't know.
It was a turbo.
Yeah, oh yeah.
It was a turbo,
Twin turbo, automatic, 2JZ.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that engine and gearbox has actually gone into another hot rod. A friend of mine has got it now. I started the build, then he took over. It's a 67 Chevelle.
That is cool.
With a 2JZ in it. So yeah, that should hit the road sometime between 2022 and 2032.
Like all our projects.
Like all our projects. We've got too many in the pipeline anyways.
But that kind of sounds like it's inspired by Tokyo Drift.
I have to admit it, I think it kind of was, because that Mustang with that other, it is a Skyline engine, wasn't it, the Mustang?
I think it was a Sylvia. I think they had
Skyline,
a Sylvia,
yeah.
They crashed it.
Yeah. But the idea was actually to make the Chevelle a daily drive before all this NGT stuff happened in the north. So the idea was to have a nice automatic 2JZ non-turbo. So we started off with the Crown.
Oh really?
A 6-cylinder, but that didn't work for us. There were some issues with the engine.
But those must have been much simpler and easier to use, right?
They were, and there were many Crowns that probably came into India with a lot of Japanese companies or embassies or whatever. So they were easily available and much cheaper than them. I think back in the day, but for like sub 2 lakhs, you could get a beautiful Crown.
You still get them for you used to get them for 1 lakh, but now there's a lot of
I don't know where they are. I mean, obviously they're off the road, and now people who have them will completely overvalue them. They'll call them muscle cars or some shit, but they're not.
But as people were saying, oh, why don't you do a drift build? A drift build isn't cheap. Like we were talking about, can you drift this car? You can break the traction, but a drift build or a muscle car has more power than you actually need, right? And that's where you're losing traction.
Basically, you're breaking traction all the time.
Yeah.
But something like this, in its stock form, cannot be a drift car.
I agree.
Probably with this engine, it won't happen. Even if you put multiple carburetors, and I think perhaps if you turbocharge this same engine and you forge the internals and that whole shebang, which will cost you an arm and a leg, sure, yeah, it could be a drift car. But it doesn't have enough power. It's a rear-wheel drive. I think the body is really light, much lighter than an Ambi or a Contessa. So yeah, it could definitely. It has it's a good starting point for sure.
So these used to go for I've seen one for sale 3-4 years ago for 30k in this condition, and I was shocked. 30k, that's great. But what happened was, I guess over time they started getting really popular. Like now you've got guys on Instagram building these.
Yeah.
And that's what has brought up the prices on them.
So the question is, are these values really true values? And if someone's willing to pay you 2 lakhs for an NE, then it's the value, right? I mean, that's how the market is determined.
Yeah.
But if you're lucky, someone has a disused NE parked in a garage, they're not using it, and you want to make it a nice hot rod, put some, maybe change the front lights from square to put 2 circular.
Yeah, give it that Fiat look, right?
That Mira Fury kind of homage. I think it's a great fun car. It's a much more drivable classic and probably has more power than an Ambi or a Fiat as well.
Definitely. Size is also great. Right?
Yeah.
The other thing is, I think what we're doing, so the Lada, as we were saying, is a very similar platform to this.
Yeah.
I find the car, the front is identical. The suspension in the front is identical. The mounting points for the engine and transmission and everything is identical.
Right.
But between this car and that one, maybe because that's a wagon, and
there probably will be differences because the wagon probably built to take more load.
Actually,
in the rear.
I think it's because of the suspension points. I think the shock absorbers had to shift further out, and that's why it's different.
Okay.
But that's
But see, the Russians will re-engineer the car again to suit their market, right, and the conditions.
But
even that car, for instance, I think this is a 4-speed gearbox?
I never searched for the last gear.
So I don't know if it has a 5th. You can try it.
Does it have a
And
fifth? No, it doesn't.
I don't think it does.
It doesn't.
But I think the Lada has a fifth. That particular one that we have has a fifth, and that engine is a 1500. So they obviously, I think the Lada came also with multiple engine variants. But
Yeah.
I think 1600 or maybe 1800 was like the top.
They had a twin cam too. So those are. They also had a.
Yeah, we just read up that, right? That they had a Lada rally team where they rallied these Rivas and the Nivas. I'm pretty sure the Niva has done the Paris-Dakar.
Really?
It was in the classic Paris-Dakar. They had the Nivas running, and yeah, the rally team ran a Wenkel engine, which is, as we know it now, a rotary.
Yeah.
So imagine this spooling up. Maybe that can be a drift car.
Yeah. Or maybe the other car we're building. So the other thing is the diff is stronger.
Where are we going to find a Wenkel engine in Goa now? Huh?
No, I'm talking about our
Find a RX-7 junking somewhere.
our actual Lada has a Mercedes engine currently in. So that might be the cheapest way to build this. You get loads of 124s, E220s. You get
Especially ones now running out of papers, right? So
Yeah,
the people are just trying to get rid of them for whatever they can get.
Yeah. And also they rust too. They're not any better. Like they have some problems with rust. And that is a problem. Sometimes it's like, doesn't make sense to fix one.
Indian conditions are brutal, and I'm sure,
That is true.
we don't look after our cars really the way we should. We don't have a
No.
lot of covered parking or temperature control stuff. But I think, yeah, if this first build goes well, perhaps you'll start a trend on what could be a affordable swap for a Lada or a NE or whatever.
Or even a Fiat, right?
Oof,
Yeah.
blow the wheels off a Fiat with that. I mean,
Yeah.
I put a Gypsy 1.3 carbureted engine and gearbox in a Fiat, and I remember driving it around, and the wheels came off because there was just so much.
So my friend built
Yeah.
one of those too. He made the mistake of not changing the differential.
I didn't
he-
change the differential.
No, not
So
the
we had a-
differential. Sorry, the drive shaft. You must have used the Gypsy drive shaft because that is sturdier. He blew the drive shaft.
That's possible. Also, if the balancing is out, must have blown it. You want
We have to do something crazy. Maybe we should drift it. So yeah, the thing about
handbrake quickly.
there is a turn coming up.
No more. No
I'm-
more.
so-
I want to live to tell my grandchildren the story. Actually, let's hope the station wagon which you put the 220 engine into, that when that gets running, that should be a drift car.
That could do it, right? Because that'll be about 150 horsepower. That's double of what it has now. This This should be about what, 50 horsepower? 60?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think a carbureted Esteem used to be 70, 75. So this is definitely going to be less than that. So 60, 55, 60.
Yeah. It's not the fastest thing. I think it's meant to be more reliable, and that was its purpose, right? It's more to move.
But also in its time, it was much. I'm sure it was much quicker than an Ambi,
Definitely.
right? Contessa and this one probably.
When did the Isuzu Ambis come out?
I think in the 90s.
Really?
Yeah. I mean,
Let's see.
not in the 80s for sure.
So that's not called a Mark IV, is it?
The Mark IV I still think was the BNC one, but that shape, that overall grille and the kind of the headlights and all that. So probably then they became the Ambassador Nova, and I honestly, I know there's the Mark 1, then there's the Mark 2, which is quite a thing. Then there's the Mark 4, which is the 80s looking, which had a more bold kind of grille, and it had a chin under like an air dam.
Oh, really? Okay.
So I think that's the Mark 4, and there's an asshole behind us. Yay! Okay,
Yeah.
no, maybe they're not assholes. So it's nice. But yeah, so I think the Mark 4 had that front chin and had the chrome bumpers with the overriders in rubber,
Okay.
right? And then you had after that the change up was the fiberglass bumpers,
Okay, I didn't know that.
which I still have one.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's probably the end of production.
Yeah,
The last
fiberglass front, rear. Yeah. And I think the Mark 4 used to have square indicator lights below the headlights, and I think then they went back to a round kind of.
So what would you do with this? Like, we've spoken about a body kit and stuff like that. I think that's the most you could do with this to make it
Well, see,
interesting,
this
right?
car itself runs beautifully. So I don't
Yeah.
know if it's even worth messing with this car's engine, gearbox.
Definitely
Yes, I
not.
think we could maybe work on the brakes in due course, suspension,
So that is one question from
bushings, all of that shit.
from people. What do you do to improve this car? What would you do? I think definitely brakes. Maybe you could fit on linear.
Steering, brakes.
Yeah.
And obviously the engine's fine. So my logic with cars, if you're not going the whole hog
Yeah.
in kind of what we so I think we're already doing the Lada, which is a complete mod.
Yeah.
So we're not so, let's say, motivated to do another complete mod on this because it's such similar cars. So let's try and keep this as close to original as possible. Maybe what we could do in due course, make headers, add an air filter, let it breathe better, so
Yeah.
we have better, little more power.
I guess
you know?
the budget-friendly mods, not like you
Well,
wouldn't go all
in
the
a
way.
carbureted car, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, if you had an ECU, then you can always put a piggyback
Yeah.
or re-flash your ECU for like a little more power. Here you can probably change the jets in
In the car.
the carb, give it a little more power as well. So, but it runs so well. Why mess with it? You know, it's
Yeah.
rare to find a car which has been
Still on the road, actually.
Still on the road, valid papers, everything,
Yeah.
running well. Why don't mess with it? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's never going to be worth a ton of money, but that's not the point.
Yeah.
I mean, here your Palio is packed up, but your NE is still running.
Ouch! Ouch! You went there.
I went there.
So yeah, I think I'll be using this for a little longer. Maybe I'll try to make my new daily something else. But this was fun. I enjoy it actually.
There's something so charming about older cars, right? There's so much more character, perhaps there are memories attached to it. People call them a time capsule or like a time traveling machine because it's behind the wheel or in the car. You're actually transported into a different era.
It's
I
very
think that's-
relatable. This
yeah.
car, like I think when a person sees an older car, if they see maybe a Cadillac or a Mercedes, they might not be so. It's not a welcoming car. You might not think, okay, this person
Well,
is
it's a bit
approachable.
bourgeois,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
This was a car which was still for the wealthy Indians at that time.
But it's very relatable for people, right?
But people saw them growing up. You saw an Omni growing up, an 800. You saw an Ambi, a Contessa. This bike guy smiling at us because he knows he's seen it as a kid, right? So there's a lot of nostalgia attached to it, and that's why perhaps all these Indian kind of origin cars, which are now kind of modern classics, will go up in value over time significantly, which they already are doing.
Of course,
People are asking crazy money for Contessas and stuff because that's where the memories are.
Yeah.
You know,
there's
and-
nostalgia. There's nostalgia
I
in
mean,
these cars.
I had a Contessa growing up as like used to pick me up from school and all that. But I think my dad made me use the car till I was like from 1990 to like 2003. So I'm done. You know, like
You don't want to see it anymore.
I love it. I respect it, but I don't want one. I've done my time with it. Also, I had a BMW E21 with a Contessa engine and gearbox in it for a while. So I've had my Contessa. Actually, my Ambassador still has that Isuzu engine. So I don't think the Isuzus and the Hindustan Motors cars are leaving my life anytime soon. But it's good. It's coincidence or whatever. But my grandfather worked in the Hindustan Motors. My father started his career in Hindustan Motors.
Really? Okay.
So yeah, it's interesting. There's some connection, I guess.
Yeah, I think your heart will always be with the Ambassador too, right?
Yeah,
You'll have one or
growing
two.
up, my granddad had an Ambassador, and you wouldn't catch me dead in one. Like I would hate it when he came to pick me up from school. But now it's like, I guess like the memories are attached to it. It's nostalgia, and you drive it around, people give you a smile. Whereas you drive around anything, it's not a statement of money; it's a statement of passion.
Yeah.
I think that's the difference.
Yeah, like the few times I took this out, there's always somebody saying, "Hey, nice car," or they'll wave out. They'll be happy.
So when
to
you
see
drive
it.
your 124 or 123,
Not as much. Definitely not
That's
as
it,
much.
yeah.
Because it looks like there is a slight snob value to it. To be honest,
I think so.
I think that is the problem. I think people they'll not be so. It's not as approachable as this. Like
Yeah.
a Beetle. A Beetle is cute, right? A Beetle is cute and.
And it's a people's car, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it was mass produced.
Of course.
What is the most produced car in the world?
I believe so, right?
And Ambassadors must be a close second.
You think so?
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
In India for sure, but this
no,
is
but think about it. The Ambassador was produced from, I think, 59 or 57. I'm not too sure. I think maybe 57. But anyway, let's go with the later number, 59, till 2012 or 13.
So this
So that's
car,
a huge production run, and in India it was like one of the few cars available. And the Lada, or let's say this particular shape, now whatever the technical drawing of this car is,
yeah.
must be another huge seller globally because it is a
Apparently
Lada.
the top fifth,
There you
the
go.
fifth most common car
Yeah.
is the 124 derived, Fiat 124 derived models. Like the Fiat, there was a Fiat, there was a Lada, there was this, which is the NE, and there was something else. I forgot what it was. But there was a Czechoslovakian one, I believe. So that has a little different. All of them look a little different.
Yeah, they'll
That's
have
the
their
cool
own unique touches, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, eventually it's still the same. It's like the Beetles were produced I think in Germany, they're produced in Brazil. I'm not sure if they're produced in England, but they're produced in various places, and I think maybe somewhere in Southeast Asia they may have been produced.
The difference is that they were all produced as VWs, but this was produced under different names.
But I'm sure they all had variants. Like they weren't identical wherever they
exactly,
were.
Exactly. So there is this thing about VW vans. So you have the split window. That's the one with two glasses in the front.
Yeah.
And you have the bay window. So what would happen in Brazil is the back end, you'd have something with the back end of a split and the front end of a bay. Because they kind of must have taken the tooling of the...
but maybe that's just what worked better for local conditions, you know?
Or maybe it's kind of like what we had with this. This kind of was retired somewhere else.
Yeah.
Even Fiat, the Uno, the Palio, the Uno was retired in another country and probably we got the stampings, right? So that made it easier to buy.
It would be really interesting to talk to someone from the Premier kind of company, you know, who could give us an in-depth insight into where the toolings came from and this, that, you know, like a history.
I have a hunch that this is more Lada, more based on a Lada than a Fiat. Because apart from the suspension and the brakes, they're almost identical, right? Physically, mechanically. But I think the Lada had drums in the back and discs in the front, but the Fiat had discs all around.
And this?
This has drums in the back.
And this has discs in the front?
Discs in the front. So this is the same layout as a Lada.
It could be, but considering Premier had a relationship with Fiat for so many years.
Yeah.
Maybe through Fiat they found a disused Lada.
Or they just said, okay, we want the same stuff. We want what they got.
Yeah, but imagine if Fiat stopped making these in the late 60s. They probably didn't have the molds lying around.
Yeah.
So somewhere where they stopped, they started in India.
Yeah. Sounds like that.
It's a pity it didn't succeed as much as I guess Premier had hoped.
Yeah.
Because these guys want to follow us.
I think the car also didn't survive that well, right? Maybe that's another problem because of their metal quality.
Listen, this one survived in Goa, and the weather here,
maybe it was
the
just
monsoons are
well.
harsh.
Really harsh, yeah.
And you're by the ocean, so you've got a lot of salt in the air and stuff.
Yeah.
So if a car, I mean, maybe this one's just a survivor. You got lucky, like you said, a good story.
I think that is the point with this one. I think it is just a survival. But
maybe they just got sold to a lot of B towns. You know, like they must have got sold in the metropolitan cities first, and then filtered down to B towns, and maybe some didn't survive. You know, I don't know.
So actually, I remember sitting in a car, just like this, when I came to Goa once, met a relative, and it turns out it wasn't in NE. I found out now that was actually Fiat 124.
There you go.
Yeah. I think you were talking about this too, right? You had a...
You know, I mean, obviously, we're going by 20 years. I think there was a chap in Calcutta who had a Fiat 124, but I think it may have been like a Ford or Mirafiori. So I don't know if it's the same thing. And I think they're similar, but maybe not the same.
Was it a 127? Was they called a 127? It looks like 4 headlights?
Yeah.
I think I've seen that car, yeah.
So I think there was one black one in Cal. I remember seeing it in a workshop, and the guy was refurbing it in the mid 90s and had put Esteem seats in it. So really giving it the modern kind of upgrade. And then in Delhi, there used to be a gentleman who used to come to Gymkhana Club who had something similar to this, but I think it was bigger.
That might have been that 126.
But I think, like, for example, with the USSR being, our partners in arms and, most favorite nation kind of situation with India in the 70s and 80s. That I'm sure the embassies bought a lot of Ladas. Like,
And before the 80s, because this might have come in what do you call 79, 80. Before that, this would have been an import, right? It wouldn't have been a...
yeah. Like for instance, there's a very well-known vintage car restorer and connector in Delhi called Tutu Dhawan. And I think he used to have a picture in his garage of him in a Lada.
I think I've seen
rallying it.
Yeah.
And I think he did the Himalayan quite a few times in the Lada, and he said because it was the most sturdy car, right? He said it wouldn't break. And many years later, my friend Sahir and I came across a Lada in Delhi, which was painted yellow, and we hammered it around for a couple of weeks in Delhi because it belonged to his cousin. And even though it had an NE dashboard, it wasn't an NE because it had the round lights and all that. So it must have been a Lada with just probably changed from left-hand drive to right-hand drive or steering. And was a rally car at some stage in its life, so it was beautiful to drive. Had a single Weber on it. Gave a average, I think, of 1 or 2 kilometers a liter. But great fun, loud exhaust, and we used to hammer it. No drifting then, but the steering was that bad we didn't know which way we were going on a corner. But
I think that problem's still there with this.
Yeah.
Maybe it's inherent. Maybe that's what...
These cars are old, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think, I've seen a picture of a Fiat 124 pre-production of an NE racing in Sholavram or Barrackpur or wherever, and raced by a gentleman from Bombay, Jangu Nicholson, who was, I think, the sheriff of Bombay at some stage. I think he's a very well-known gentleman in the Parsi community. I think that
he had an E30.
I think that E30 is with that Mr. Sarabji or whatever, right?
That's
What's his name?
He was into racing, autocar.
Yeah, so autocar, exactly.
Yeah.
So that same E30 was his as well, and he raced the E30 as well. So before he raced the E30, he raced this.
Yeah.
So he was quite a racer, Mr. Nicholson. So yeah, but that was a proper 124 in the same shape, but I think it was green with round headlights.
I'm guessing this engine is superior though to the 124 engine. I was reading.
I don't know what engine it had. How many cc?
It had a. I think it didn't have an overhead engine. So what happened was Fiat actually took. Lada took a more modern engine from Fiat, and they then worked on that. So they took something, I think 1500 cc, and that was overhead. That was more modern. So they said, "Oh, why don't we take this?" And
makes sense.
It was made. So I thought initially that it was a Russian engine, Russian design, but no, it is. It's a Fiat engine itself.
I mean, if Fiat were selling them a car, I'm sure they would have sold them an engine.
So I think that is a lot of interesting things about this car, little quirky bits.
So what do you think these should be worth?
I don't know. I would like to buy them as cheap as possible. I think they're going up in value. That is definitely the case with this because it's hit its bottom. I think you could have got a really good condition one 2 years ago, maybe for 70k, and it's slowly becoming difficult to find one under a lakh of rupees. A good one. That is the case. And you're always going to have to do something. You're always going to have to paint it or...
See, when you're buying an old car, you're going to have to do the suspension, brakes, the engine if you're unlucky. And the bodywork is a given. Like, so you should know that's going to happen. Like, not be under any misconceptions. But even then, I mean, if you're entering a sub lakh on a car like this,
so there is another...
Spend another lakh on it, you have a great modern classic.
Exactly.
You know, and it's so usable. Like the other day we went to Mapsa in this. We even got special parking because they like the car. Otherwise those guys don't allow you to park there. So, yeah, we see some guys on Instagram doing a good job, and
they're modding them. They look quite cool. So I think with that we'll close on this video.
It's time to go to the chai shop.
Yes.
In the rain.
Let's see what we come up with next week. Something different. So see you guys on that note.
See you, Cashew Rusty.
Cashew Rusty. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.